Vandenberg Space Force Base, California, Monday, 18 April 2022, 5:18 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Vice President Kamala Harris, the California cackler, the Sacramento side piece, they're frightened in Russia, they're quaking in China because she sounds like Dan Quayle but she's got a vagina, strides confidently to the podium to address a crowd of active-duty U.S. Space Force personnel, and she opens her remarks thusly, quote, I think everyone here recognizes how extraordinary space is, whether it's satellites that orbit the Earth, humans that land on the moon, or telescopes that peer into the furthest reaches of the universe. Space is exciting, it spurs our imaginations, and it forces us to ask big questions. Space affects us all, and it connects us all. In recent months, you have heard the President and me talking a lot about defending international norms and rules. Rules and norms are shared principles that guide the behavior of peoples and of communities. They are common understandings of what is right, what is wrong, and what is acceptable. Whether it is the way we interact with our colleagues at work or the way nations interact with each other on the world stage, rules and norms provide us all with a sense of order and stability. End quote. Again, I have no idea who writes her speeches, or even if it's an actual person and not some Mad Lib's random word speech generator, because it does seem that way sometimes. But whomever that person is, he or she possesses a unique facility for treating every audience like they have the collective mentality of a group of learning disabled 3-year-olds in a preschool class. Remember the last time she tried to talk about space? When they dragged in all those 11 and 12-year-old child actors to pretend to be excited, well, enraptured really, over the vice president explaining how space is big and space is exciting and there are things in space, big things. Sometimes people even go into space. Woo! This all would have remained secret, of course. I mean, the fact that they had a casting call for professional child actors because Kamala Harris could never speak to a group of actual children without it turning into a big embarrassing disaster. Except that all the busybody stage moms started bragging on Twitter about how their kids had gotten the gig. But it seems consistent with this administration, whether you're a grown adult or a small child, they think you are stupid. Like really, really profoundly stupid. Yes, that's right. Kamala Harris really does believe that she's smarter than you and smarter than your children, though both of those claims are manifestly dubious given the available body of empirical evidence to the contrary. Former President Barack Obama also thinks you're stupid, and he emerged from the woodwork earlier this week to explain in tedious, painstaking, finger-wagging detail why you, Mr. and Mrs. America, are such a bunch of benighted bumpkins that you obviously need an intermediary to help you determine truth from falsehood. Barack Obama, he lays awake at night, terrified at the prospect of you being able to read things for yourself and decide what your own beliefs are. And so Mr. Obama is now going to devote his time and his energies to an effort that he calls fighting online misinformation, but which really means permanent federal government oversight of all of your social media interactions, because wouldn't that be fun? Soon it'll be a part of our morning routine. You get up, you take a shower, brew up some coffee, then open your email to see how many violation messages you have from the Ministry of Truth and Mental Hygiene and how many social credit points you've been docked as a result. Hey, remember that private Facebook message you sent to your wife yesterday? Well, it contained 3 instances of unapproved political wrongthink, for which you are sentenced to 1 day of house arrest for each individual offense. Further instances of this behavior, should they occur, will result in a trip to the re-education camp. Have a nice day. God bless America. But back to the vice president and her speechwriter, because I'm not finished with the two of them yet. You will notice in her entire speech about space exploration, she did not mention a single one of this country's achievements in manned spaceflight. She spoke briefly about China and Russia doing anti-satellite missile tests, and she pledged that we aren't going to do any such testing, which we have never done anyway and had no intention of doing in the future. So this is a really bold commitment on the vice president's part, really going out on a limb here to stand for what's right. Just like with that anti-lynching bill the other week, which I'm sure the families of the 0 Americans lynched in the past 60 years really, really appreciated. But their long wait is over now. Up until last week, it was perfectly legal to string somebody up from a fucking tree whenever you felt like doing a bit of extrajudicial killing. But it took the moral courage of the Democrat Party to finally set things right and bring this terrible scourge to an end, finally. But here's the thing, Madam Vice President. May I call you Madam Vice President? If you're giving a space policy speech at a Space Force base to an assembled crowd of Space Force personnel, and the day you're giving the speech is the 50th anniversary of the launch of Apollo 16, mightn't that warrant some sort of passing mention? Granted, you have never really impressed me as much of a spaceflight enthusiast, but there is nobody in the office of the Vice President who has a basic high school level grasp of modern American history. I ask that question rhetorically, of course, because we know there probably isn't. Jim Eagle, hit the music if you please. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, your island of hope in a sea of malaise, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. Happy Friday. I hope your work week has arrived at an agreeable conclusion. I am your eponymous host and humble servant, and it was back in early November of last year, so nearly 6 months now, when I proposed right here on this program my belief that we were passing peak woke. That Wokesterism had reached the apogee of its power and influence. It had crested the proverbial hill, if you like, and there was nothing left to do now but watch in contentment and delight as the slow, inexorable descent to the final fiery train wreck runs its course. And I'm feeling tonight like that was a fairly solid prediction, as most of my predictions tend to be. But that's why you're watching in the first place, isn't it? This has been just about the worst week for the forces of institutionalized Wokesterism since the week when they found out they were going to be required to support former segregationist senator and card-carrying heterocis-normative white male Joseph R. Biden for the presidency of the United States. But this week was a whole hell of a lot worse than that, and it really was quite a wondrously enjoyable thing to behold. So let's take a walk down memory lane and enjoy it all over again, shall we? Now first, I need to register my continuing happiness, which I mentioned in the last video, that Republican governors are finally figuring out how to play political hardball and get good results out of it. A lot of people on the right were criticizing Governor Greg Abbott of Texas 10 days ago because he was taking the illegal aliens that Biden and Mayorkas were dumping in Texas and promptly busing them right to Washington, D.C. I said I thought it was a great idea. And what's happened since then? Several other governors have also joined the project, and the optics have gotten bad enough that the Department of Hospitable Settlement is now considering holding off on the lifting of the Title 42 restriction, because now, if they lift it when it was scheduled to be lifted, they know they have no way of preventing the nation's capital from being turned into a gigantic open-air illegal alien homeless camp. And they know if that happens, it's going to be another, and possibly the worst yet, in a long line of incidents that make the members of this administration look like equal parts bumbling incompetents and enemy saboteurs. What's the moral of the story here? There is no negotiating with these maniacs. They will use every blunt force means at their disposal to ram through the permanent changes they wish to make to the society. And the only way of opposing them effectively is through equal amounts of brute force. Looking bad on television is the only thing these people care about. So make them look bad on television. Make them look so bad that not even a compliant fake news media can put enough lipstick on the pig to make the story look like something other than what it is. Namely, a story about a central government that's being run by people who detest their own country's citizens and are trying on purpose in a concerted, coordinated fashion to make their lives worse. Seriously, if you were Joe Biden and you were taking office on 20 January of last year, and your objective going in was to wreck the economy, wreck the culture, wreck the children, and make life as miserable as possible for the largest number of Americans, you would do all the same things he has done in the actual event, like right down the line, one by one. There's not a single exception. Because improving the condition of U.S. citizens and lawful immigrants simply is not something this administration concerns itself with. They hardly even pretend otherwise. It really is a thing to behold sometimes. You know who else is holding the line? Manning the barricades on behalf of the normal, decent people of the country, just like he always is? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who continues to smack the ball 350 yards down the middle of the fairway each time Bob Chapek and Disney set it up on the tee for him, which they keep doing over and over again for some reason, but I guess 60 million bucks a year doesn't buy as good of a CEO as it used to. And Disney, if you're listening, I can do the job just as badly, and I'll do it for a quarter of what this guy makes, so give me a call, we'll talk. So Disney, which has boldly repositioned itself as a lifestyle brand for adult homosexuals, they went all in on opposing Florida's Parental Rights in Education Act, commonly known by a euphemism I shall not repeat here since it's very stupid and dishonest. And it didn't make a damn bit of difference anyway, because the Florida legislature duly passed the bill, the governor duly signed it, and it became enshrined in law last week. Bob Chapek gained absolutely nothing by all of the empty posturing and hostage videos. Unless you call 1 million Disney Plus cancellations a gain, which I'm pretty sure they don't around the accounting department over at the Mouse House, and unless you call sacrificing the last little bit of trust and goodwill that your company still enjoyed with the American public at large, and specifically with the parents of small children who now no longer view Disney as a brand focused on wholesome entertainment for kids and families, but rather as a lifestyle brand for adult homosexuals, just like Chapek wanted. But Ron DeSantis and the Florida Republicans, were they happy and content with that one victory? Did they call off the dogs like a normal, feckless, cowardly establishment Republican would do? No, they did not, and God bless them for it, because we need a hell of a lot more of that. Perverts are preying on our children. Disney is supporting and facilitating it. Therefore, Disney will no longer receive any favorable treatment from the state where we run the government. And how wonderful to have a Republican governor with the courage and the moral clarity to see simple truths in simple terms and to speak and act accordingly. And that's what came down this week. Florida revoked the special sweetheart deal that Disney has had since 1966 when, as a condition of building the second much bigger Disney theme park on a patch of central Florida swampland, the governor and the legislature gave them a deal whereby they would receive all manner of special wonderful tax exemptions, and even to be a local government unto themselves for the lands where they're building these facilities. Needless to say, Disney has profited to the tune of untold tens of billions of dollars as a result of this deal over the course of the last 56 years, but tonight that deal is a thing of the past because Ron DeSantis canceled it. Now, I've grown fairly accustomed in recent years to seeing and hearing things I never expected to see or hear before, but even I was gobsmacked yesterday to see radical leftists completely losing their shit over the prospect that one of the richest, most powerful corporations in world history might have to start paying its taxes in full. Because I always thought radical leftists were staunchly opposed to corporate welfare for billionaires. Did I just have that one wrong this whole time? It seems like the Democrats in the Florida legislature took it even worse than the Twitter rage mob did, which is saying something because... And if you haven't seen this piece of video, I do very highly recommend it. Because while the legislature is in session, while the author of the bill is trying to introduce it and put it up for a vote, the Democrats in the chamber, they're literally just shrieking nonsense sounds and making random animal noises. If I had to describe it, I'd say it sounded like a group of seals simultaneously having an orgy and being executed. But they were just making any desperate attempt they could think of to stop their state government collecting its full share of taxes from one of the biggest corporate behemoths on the face of the earth. So, in a world of increasingly strange bedfellows, and not just at Johnny Depp's house, it would seem the Florida Democrats have now positioned themselves as a bunch of anti-tax, small government, radical libertarians, which I personally never saw coming, but hey, that's why we have to keep on our toes, because you never know what the next day will bring. When one of your major parties, and consequently half the people in the country, give or take, are untethered from anything resembling a coherent political philosophy and unburdened by any overabundance of self-awareness. So you just make it up as you go, day by day, and sometimes you have to scream random animal noises while the grown-ups in the room are passing a law that if you actually believed in your own stated principles, you would be agreeing with and voting for. So already we've got a pretty shockingly disastrous week for our friends over on the radical left, but It does not end there, not by a long shot, because woke Netflix and woke CNN both had a week that neither one will be writing home about anytime soon. First came the news that woke Netflix had hemorrhaged something like 200,000 subscribers in the first quarter of 2022, when their projection had been that they were going to add around twice that number, which adds up to a total miscalculation of 600,000 subscribers, and your stock price taking a 40% dump. And my God, when you read the Netflix press release trying to explain the whole thing away, it sounds nearly as absurd as it does when Joe Biden and Lady Ginger McFirebush of Alabaster Farms try to blame your high gas prices on the invasion of one former Soviet republic by another, rather than on the fact that their administration crippled our domestic energy industry as their first order of business on their first day. So according to Netflix, they are bleeding subscribers by the hundreds of thousands because of the economy and the pandemic. Wait, come again? Did you say the pandemic? You mean the pandemic where the government told us we all had to stay home and watch Netflix? That pandemic? God, when will these giant multinational corporations ever figure out that sometimes the best play is to say nothing and not issue a press release? There's no law that says you have to try and lie your way out of trouble. You do have the right to remain silent, because anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion and by your angry shareholders. But it evidently has never occurred to anyone at Netflix, or if it has, they're not saying it out loud, that people might be leaving their service in droves because they don't want to pay good money to watch a bunch of ridiculous woke bullshit. And while we're on the subject of ridiculous woke bullshit and the sleazebags who purvey it, this week has also seen the ignominious end of CNN Plus, the much ballyhooed streaming service brought to you by the only workplace in the United States of America where you can jack off in front of your colleagues during a work meeting and not lose your job. And who could ever have predicted this outcome? CNN, the most mistrusted name in fake news charlatanism, the basement-rated network that can't dream of pulling 1 million viewers for its primetime schedule, which relies on televisions in empty bus terminals for the lion's share of its ratings, they decided to adopt the very bold, very innovative stance of, well, nobody wants to watch us for free, so let's charge extra! It'll be great! CNN Plus was in existence for 23 days, which means CNN Plus makes New Coke and the Edsel look like wildly successful long-term cultural institutions by comparison. Even the Pet Rock managed to stay popular for about 1.5 years. And that was quite literally a rock in a box, and that scam lasted 20 times longer than CNN Plus did. But admittedly, the Pet Rock probably has more intellectual value than anything on CNN, which now officially stands for Content Not Noticed. Oh, the airplane mandate got struck down this week too. I told you it was a good week. And in the days since, every prominent Democrat, every fake news performance artist, they've all gone out of their way to remind us that they don't have the faintest idea how the rule of law works. So you got all these idiots blubbering on television, the usual suspects mostly. Your Tony Fauci's and your Leanna Wen's and so on, moaning about, oh, the masks work, the masks are effective, this is a public health issue, blah, blah, blah. So? And? The court case has nothing at all to do with whether masks work or whether a mask mandate is warranted or not. The only question before the judge was, does the CDC have the authority, under the wording of the relevant statute, to impose this mandate? And they very clearly do not, because the authority for the mandate was predicated on a laughably expansive reading of the word sanitation. The mandate is only legal if mask wearing falls under the heading of sanitation. Now, if I asked you what springs to mind when you think of the word sanitation, would you think of people wearing surgical masks on airplanes? No, of course you wouldn't, because you're not a crazy person. And you know sanitation means things like picking up garbage and cleaning toilets, which, now that I think of it, sounds like a job that Tony Fauci might actually be qualified for. And we will leave it there for tonight. As we close out this uniquely gratifying week in American history, thank you very much indeed for watching. Here is wishing everyone a delightful, edifying weekend. I will see you Monday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.